Hello, how are you doing? I just finished reading my first book of the new year of 2023. And it was really excellent. And I always think this is a really good sign. And hopefully the rest of the year will be filled with great reads as well. But or maybe this will end up being the best book I'll have read this year. I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up being in my top reads of the year. The novel is The New Life by Tom Crewe. It's a debut book. It's only just come out, but it's been getting a lot of hype, at least amongst people that I follow. It's got some quite favorable reviews, and why I think it is so special, because it is more than what you just read from the description on the cover. I mean, you might read about briefly what it's about and think, oh, yeah, I know what I'm going to get with this book. And let me tell you, you don't. Or at least I don't think you will. Or at least I didn't when I was reading it. Or, I mean, it is what it says in the description, but it is much more complex and interesting in how it gets into the intricacies of the lives of these characters and the questions it poses and the dilemmas that they have. So it begins in the summer of 1894 in England with a character named John Addington, who's just made a very important decision that he's not going to hide his desire or romantic longing for other men anymore. He's middle-aged. He's been married to a woman named Catherine his entire life. They have multiple children who are all adults themselves. And one day at a swimming pond in London, where men swim nude, he meets a man named Frank that he decides he wants to have a romantic and sexual relationship with. And in the past, whenever he's had these desires and the few times he's acted upon them, he's then repressed them again and sublimated them. And but now he wants to live openly out in the public. And the novel explores, the dilemmas and issues to do with this of coming out, as you would expect, especially in this time period in Victorian times, and how do you go about changing the society around you and the attitudes of people around you in order to change the laws of the country, and how do you change the laws of the country before you change the attitudes of the people around you, and how do you reconcile your own sense of morality within yourself that you've learned from growing up in this society, with your own desires, and how do you achieve those desires without impeding upon the happiness of other people. And it gets into all of these questions, and of course, like, just hearing about this story on the surface, you're like, oh yeah, go for it, be open, be who you really are, and of course that impulse is right, but then as it gets into the issues that he encounters along the way, and in the complexity of the different characters' lives, these questions become much more difficult. And I think what the novel does is get you to ponder your own assumptions about what is right and what is just in terms of living a fulfilling life and achieving all of your desires. And running parallel to John's story in this novel is the tale of a shy young man named Henry, who at the very beginning of the book, he enters into a marriage with a woman named Edith, and they have an unconventional relationship because Henry believes in this conception of the new life where marriages can be founded on like non-traditional bases of through intellectual coupleship, rather than sexual or necessarily romantic. So he enters into this marriage with a woman named Edith, and they live separately from each other. And Edith is pursuing a romantic relationship with a woman named Angelica, and Henry himself has his own sexual peculiarities, which he finds it excruciating to admit to. So the novel moves back and forth between the stories of Henry and John, and following their different journeys, and but how they form a connection with each other and start exchanging letters, because they're both writers. They're both really interested in progressing the sexual mores of the time into the future, and they decide to collaborate on this book called Sexual Inversion, looking at homosexuality in current society and using some case studies and interviewing a number of different men who identify as homosexuals, or inverts as they're known at the time. I had never really come across this sort of antiquated term of inverts until I read a while ago Radclyffe Hall's novel The Well of Loneliness, and in this she refers to inverts and the main character being an invert and discovering this whole society of a sort of underground society of inverts. And this is a really great novel as well from the early 20th century. So they use this term inverts, and in this book, they want to change people's attitudes as well as the laws of the time, because of course in England at this time in the late 1800s, homosexuality was actually criminalized, not just any display in public but in private as well. And of course this culminates in the trials of Oscar Wilde, which occur in 1895, and which cast a shadow over the story. So even though they have these idealistic notions to change things by publishing and circulating this book, historical circumstances like the trial of Oscar Wilde have implications on how things play out, as well as the publication of the book itself and how it affects people that are connected to the publication. And it dramatically complicates their aims of writing this book. And all of these matters create this very intriguing and unexpected plot, which plays out over the course of 2 years of these characters' lives, and I found it so riveting following it. So the author, Tom Crewe, he has an academic background and speciality in the history of Britain at this time, and I think his understanding of this period really adds to the writing of the novel. There are so many parts of this which are really atmospheric and bring this period of time to life. For instance, there's a really striking scene when London becomes covered in a thick layer of fog, so much so that boys with lanterns need to be hired to guide people from spot to spot throughout the city. And of course, this also serves as a natural metaphor in the story for the dilemmas that these characters are facing, as well as providing a romantic opportunity for a couple to realize their desires out in the open in a way that they couldn't if there wasn't this layer of fog concealing them. But I also think Tom Crewe's speciality and understanding of this historical period allows him to very effectively deviate from the facts of history when it is necessary, and sort of serves better the plot and the story of the book in a way that if it was just told as a historical account, it wouldn't really quite work in the same way. So the two main characters, they are based on real-life historical figures who did write a book such as this, but he just tweaks the facts here and there in a way which does really work for the story, and also allows him to bring out the themes that he's discussing in this novel to do with identity and realizing and expressing your desires and the ways in which we do that. The writing is also highly sensuous, as you would hope, in given the subject matter of this book, but which really effectively captures the objects of these characters' desires and how these longings manifest for these characters. So it makes it a very sexy novel, like, albeit in a very English way, but is also like completely uninhibited and very forthright in describing these desires. And so I think it is naturally aligned with the writing of Alan Hollinghurst, and if you enjoy his novels, I'm sure you'll love this book. I found it moving how John has this horrible sense of being watched throughout his life, watched by larger society and by his father in particular, like even after his father has died, and how this has inhibited him throughout his entire life. But once he makes the decision to be open and to live openly and love who he wants to, how this inhibits upon the freedoms of others and passes on this sense of being watched to others, particularly for his wife, Catherine. And at one point in the novel, at a crucial point, she speaks up for herself and makes a really strong statement. And so the novel's really interesting in how, even though the two central characters are men, it shows how the concerns of women and the issues of women's rights sort of intersect with these other progressive notions that they're trying to put forward, and the sometimes alignment between those things and sometimes the clashes between them. As total disclosures are made, it also turns some characters who are naturally supportive and sympathetic to John and Henry against them, and this creates more haunting questions for the reader about how much liberty do we actually have to reveal ourselves to the larger world? How much honesty can our personal relationships and the larger society take when we reveal ourselves in this way, when we show everything that we're thinking and feeling to the larger world? And equally, these characters' earnest pursuit of a new life teases out this vaguely shifting line between becoming and being. There obviously aren't any easy answers to these problems or dilemmas, and the novel really shows this, but by casting us back to this historical period which we believe we've progressed away from, I think the author really cleverly shows how the past is really still present in our lives. And so yeah, I just adored this novel. I think it is such an incredible debut for a first book, and a really moving experience reading it. So I'd love to know if you've read this book and if you have any thoughts about it, or if you're interested in reading it now. Please let me know in the comments below. And yeah, hopefully this is the first of many great reads this year, but I'm so glad to have read this as my first book of the year. So thank you for watching me. I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and tell me, what is the first book you've read so far this year? I'd love to hear about that as well. But I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.